Hey, this is Ryan Rockwell, founder of Grow Yoga Biz, and I have, again, one of my favorites, Paula Robato, on to talk about something very, very cool today, which is creating a mentorship program for new yoga teachers. Paula is a yoga teacher, yoga veteran of 13 years. She is an ERYT 500, went through her, straight into no RYT 500, straight into the RYT 500 for both Hatha and Kundalini, which I think is a really, really well-rounded type of teacher training. And then she's also owned Yoga for All for the last 6 years. So welcome, Paula. Thank you again for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So let's talk about the mentorship program, because this is something that I recently talked to you about. We spoke about what's been happening for you over the last year. Again, you came into the Yoga Mastermind coaching program and you were doing the studio. You were, successful with the studio. But you kind of saw yourself evolving. And I know that when we worked together, the mentorship program was an area that you wanted to start focusing on. So tell me, what kind of inspired you to start creating the mentorship program?
Well, being a studio owner and renting out my space to other yoga teachers, they would all come to me for advice. And I'm just listening to their stories, listening to their issues or the blocks that they have and the questions that they have, and all the struggles that they've been encountering as they've been kind of trying to make it work. And so what I realized is that in a first base level yoga training, we get little tidbits of the knowledge of yoga. And sometimes, depending on the training, there isn't a lot of time for the lead trainers to offer a lot of support in terms of building confidence, building a deeper practice. And so there's these teachers that are being created, and they come out not really being totally sure of themselves and which direction that they want to go.
Right.
And so I saw that there's this little gap, and my idea was to fill the gap, is to take a look at different areas that they need help in, support in, and to provide that for them.
Well, I mean, just think about it this way, like coming from as a marketing coach, the way I look at it is that when you go through your teacher training, it's very structured in terms of what you have to go through. I mean, we've discussed in the past about how the Yoga Alliance really kind of dictates what your syllabus is, what information you cover. And very rarely do yoga teachers really get a sense of, you are going to be your own entrepreneur. You are going to be running your own yoga business. And so it's like, hey, you graduated, yay, okay, now go be successful. And they're like, well, how do I go be successful? Because most times when you go into a studio and you're like, yeah, I just got RYT 200, I'm really ready to go. They're like, well, everybody has RYT 200 that comes in here. And depending upon your geographical area, it could be incredibly saturated.
Yeah.
So it's like, how do you separate yourself from the other teachers out there? Or how do you show that you're prepared to start taking on students and really teaching your own classes? And you're right, there happens to be, so here's your teacher training, here's a yoga veteran. What's that gap? Like, how do you fill that gap? And it sounds like that's what your mentorship program really provides.
Yeah, and it's customized based on the needs of each individual. So, some people will finish their training really confident in themselves, being really solid because maybe they have a solid practice, or they just naturally have this ability to teach. And so they don't have issues with confidence. But other people, the fear of sitting in the front of a class and starting to teach is immobilizing them, and they can't do it. Right. So it really depends on the individual. But so the program is designed to take a look at those specific areas and is customized based on each individual person and their needs.
Well, I mean, there's never been more of a need for a mentorship program, for new teachers than right now.
Mm-hmm.
Both you and myself have been teaching for about 13 years. And when we, came out of teacher training, there wasn't a plethora of yoga studios. There wasn't a plethora of yoga teachers. People, when you would come, teach a class, often you would get a lot of newbies, people who had never taken yoga before. So you could really screw up. You could just, I mean, I'm sure I screwed up a lot in the beginning, and people had no idea, like, if I was teaching them the right way or the wrong way. But now, because yoga has become this staple, at least within Canada, within the United States, within the UK, within Australia, and obviously working with teachers from across the world, I've found that just it's a household name.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of those things that maybe people aren't a regular practitioner, but they've been to a yoga class or two before, and they have an idea of what to expect. So now there's a little bit more pressure on yoga teachers, because there are so many teachers out there, to actually come forth with a great effort in the beginning, to actually have, a solid base of knowledge when you come on.
Mm-hmm.
And again, a lot of yoga teachers, as we know, don't have that.
Mm-hmm.
So for you to fill that gap, to be able to create that, program for them. So let's talk about that. You talked about this is a custom program for them.
Yeah.
Give me some ideas of like how that customization looks, like what some yoga teachers that you've worked with in the past have needed.
Okay. For instance, one particular student that I was working with had this person actually had a challenge even finishing the training itself. There was just so much fear and so much of her own programming that was going on in her mind about, not being good enough or not worthy enough, or, how can I be a yoga teacher? Those kinds of mental stories that were going on. So
right.
for that person, it was about breaking down some of those stories and dismantling them, and then building the confidence in the ability to teach. So we would do Skype sessions where she would be teaching me and I would be giving her direct feedback. And when there was a block that would come up, we would just work with the block. We would work with what's coming up emotionally, energetically, and then visiting some of those stories, and then learning to let them go and to create a new story, basically.
Wow, that's really in depth.
Yeah, another person was really struggling with their daily practice. Their goal with the mentorship was to be able to do their 40-day practice, and they were successful. So it was about being there and holding the space for them to be, and being accountable. Showing up, creating clear, defined goals, and then each week connecting and taking a look at, the goals that weren't met and why was that. And again, dismantling some old patterns that kept coming up that were standing in the way. Yeah.
It's amazing. I mean, I think that's every day that goes by, I notice the social programming or the mental patterns that I've had, and it's looking at those things as like, is those beliefs really true? And it comes, that's a great point, especially with our daily sadhana. So many yoga teachers, including myself, have struggled with my daily sadhana. And it's like, why do I have that? Why is that there? And what I find is that it's not even just with your daily sadhana. It could be, your diet, could be with, if you plan to work out, could be with even your relationships, or things that would be good for you, but you don't follow through.
Yeah.
Where does that, when you don't follow through with that, what mental patterns come up? What are those thoughts that you see that continually show up, like, oh, here we go again. Oh, I'm really good at, doing 3 days straight, but then that fourth day, or even past that week, then that's when I just, go back to my old patterns. So that's really great that you're working with them in that capacity
Yeah.
to really give them that custom, well, just stop them in their tracks. Like, what are you thinking now?
Hmm.
Where's that mental pattern that you've had previously that keeps you on this track? And how can we kind of look at that and see beyond it?
And that's where our own yoga training, it doesn't matter what program we're in, really doesn't have the ability to show up for students in that way. A teacher training is really designed to give you the knowledge and the techniques on passing on the teachings. But a mentorship program is where we take the student and we nurture them and we support them and hold space for them to grow. And that's kind of my goal with the mentorship.
And your mentorship program is very different than what I've seen from other studios. Really, what they're a lot of times it's 3 or 4 months, and again, there's been a variety, but often what I see is that people graduate from their teacher training. They offer this mentorship to people who've just graduated from the TT, and then what that includes is the next 3 or 4 months, you show up to these people's classes, to your teachers' classes, and you see them how they teach. And then I think that there is an eventual evolution where you begin to teach yourself in those classes. Again, it really varies, but for you, there's not this set curriculum for your mentorship program. You're taking the student where they're at, and you're like, okay, what do you need? Ultimately, what is your goal, and what do we need in order to get you there? So how long is your mentorship program?
When I first started, I thought 3 months would be great, except that I quickly learned that 3 months wasn't enough. So I say 6 months to start.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so just to get an idea, like what do you charge currently for your mentorship program?
My mentorship program is $4,000 for the 6 months.
And so that's Canadian. So obviously that will vary wherever the person is that's listening to this. But if the person is here and the person they think they need to be to begin teaching is here, for a lot of people, they need that mentorship program. They need that gap. And that simply wasn't available to us 13 years ago when we went through our TT. Like, there was no mentorship program. I didn't even hear about a mentorship program until about 2 years ago when we first started working together. And I think it makes sense if you're, someone who's struggling with their daily sadhana and they work with basically a coach, and they get to a point where that becomes an everyday part of their life, good Lord, that's worth that amount of money. And I think that's often where people get so caught up is like, what should they charge? Like, the thing that I've tried to convey to teachers is that people are only buying one thing in life, no matter what it is. It could be a rice cooker. That's always my perfect example, is the rice cooker. People are buying transformation. That's the only thing that people are buying. And transformation, by definition, is going from a less desirable state to a more desirable state. So it's like if you're walking through a store and you see a rice cooker and you're like, oh, wow, I can just kind of set it and forget it. Looks like it's really easy to clean. Right now I'm cooking in a pot, and I have to sit there often and stir it, and I can't set it, forget it, and it's kind of, again, hard to clean. Like, I'm going to get the rice cooker. This makes sense. That's going from a less desirable state to a more desirable state. Well, that might be such a crude example, but if you look at your mentorship program. Look at someone who, again, is struggling, because that's a genuine struggle for a lot of yoga teachers, is keeping up with their personal practice, their daily sadhana. And they beat themselves up. I mean, I've beat myself up so much because I'm like, how can I be a good teacher if I'm not even keeping up with my daily practice? And so you're helping that person to get to a point where yoga is becoming an everyday part of their life, an integral part of their life, and they feel like they're honoring the path of yoga. That's transformation. We always have to think about when we're looking at it, and I know you know this, Paul, I'm just kind of speaking to everyone, is that when we speak about our offerings in general, whether it's a one-on-one session, whether it's a yoga retreat, whether it's a workshop, we have to talk about the transformation, the benefits that people will get out of our offerings. Often we'll talk about like, oh, there's this many modules, and for 2 hours we'll talk about this. People aren't buying the features. I always joke and say, what's the most popular radio station? WIIFM. What's in it for me? That's what people are looking at. They're like, okay, when they come to your website, they're like, what's in it for me? When they look at your mentorship, they're like, what's in it for me? They look at your retreat, what's in it for me? So we have to speak to those benefits. And it sounds like what you've created really is customized to whatever that individual needs, and they can see very clearly what's in it for them because you customize it to their experience.
Mm-hmm.
So how have you found teachers for your mentorship program?
Well, I haven't had to do any advertising. It's mostly
Awesome.
through interaction and letting them know, I offer this service, and it sounds like you may be able to benefit from it. And is that something that you want to explore? And so we do a little session together, and they decide whether they want to move forward. Some people have stumbled on it on my website by accident and knew right away that that's what they wanted to do. And but other than that, mostly been stumbling, them contacting me and saying, I need support with this, and is this something that you can do?
Well, Paula, you've built up quite a reputation in your area as a well-respected teacher. And I say that because I don't want people sitting here, if they thought about creating a mentorship program, I don't want them to be like, oh, I have to, be really well-respected in my community. Like I have to have a big name. Listen, if you've been teaching long enough and you truly feel like you have a voice and the right message, and then you're at a place in your life where you feel like you truly could benefit other teachers, create your mentorship program. Don't wait. I mean, I always think of the quote, like, because just very quick example, like I fell in love with the movie The Secret. I fell in love with the movie The Law of Attraction. And I created a Law of Attraction coaching program and a forum, and I spent 6 months putting it together. And then it was all finished. And I said, who am I to teach someone else? I still have faults. I still have a lot of stuff going on in my life. Who am I to teach? And I let it all go. And it wasn't until I saw a quote from Pema Chodron that said, if you're waiting for the perfect time to teach, it will never come. And so if you feel like in your heart that you have the right voice, you have the right opportunity, you're in a good place to teach others, do it. Even if you're scared to death, do it. Because that's how we really grow. And I see a lot of teachers that, they have put in the time, they put in the effort, but they're a little bit scared to put themselves out there. They're a little bit scared to promote themselves. They're a little bit scared to take on that, teacher training role where they're the lead instructor. But that's how we grow. And that's how we just share our teachings. Thank you, Paula, for sharing, what you created with your mentorship program, because it's very different. It's customized, and I think you're taking in the whole person and what their vision is for being a teacher, and you're creating a program to help them that accomplish that vision, and that's incredibly important. That's such a vital part that you're playing.
It's been my pleasure.
Yeah, thank you again for your time. So we'll sign off, but thanks again, Paula, for kind of giving us a peer into your mentorship program.
Okay. Right. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. We'll talk soon.
Bye.